Welcome. If you ever imagined how it would be like to be a student at Hogwarts, trying to sleep in your common room at night, filled with cozy magic and gentle wonder, you're in the right place. Subscribe to return here anytime for peaceful stories from the castle corridors and beyond. Now, let's begin.
The fire had been burning low for some time now, but it still glowed. A slow, pulsing warmth nestled deep in the stone hearth at the heart of the common room. The flames no longer leapt or danced, but softened into amber threads that shimmered behind the iron grate, casting sleepy light across the floor. Outside, the sky was the colour of ink, heavy and full. Rain fell in a calm, steady rhythm against the castle's ancient windows, tapping faintly like fingertips against glass. In the distance, thunder had rolled once or twice earlier, low and tired, like the yawn of a sleeping dragon. But now even that had faded, leaving behind only the hush of water and stone. The castle had grown very still. In the corridors beyond the portrait hole, the staircases had ceased their shifting, settling into place like tall stone guardians with their eyes gently closed. The suits of armour stood motionless, their polished surfaces dark in the torchlight. Not even Peeves was stirring tonight. No swooping, no cackling, just silence. The kind of hush that only came to Hogwarts once most of its students had fallen fast asleep. And yet, you remained, tucked in the far corner of the common room, curled deep into the most comfortable armchair the house had to offer. It was the one near the fire, with arms worn smooth by generations of tired elbows, and a cushion that knew exactly how to hold a sleepy body. Someone had draped a patchwork blanket over the back of it earlier that evening, and now it lay warm across your lap, smelling faintly of clean laundry, chocolate frogs, and the spice of the season. You weren't reading anymore. Not really. The book in your hands was cracked open across your chest, its pages loose and faded, the corners curled like autumn leaves. You'd read the same sentence 3 times and couldn't remember a single word of it. Your eyes had grown too heavy, your body too still. You weren't resisting sleep. You were simply letting the night wrap around you slowly, like the folds of a cloak drawn close before stepping into a dream. The firelight flickered softly against the walls. It danced across the tall windows, tracing shapes on the stone. It lit the edges of portraits now sleeping peacefully in their frames, painted figures curled in armchairs of their own, breathing gently, heads bowed in sleep. One of them had been reading aloud to her neighbour earlier in the evening, but now her book had fallen into her lap, and her lips moved slowly, silently, perhaps reading to herself in her dreams. The ceiling above was shadowed in soft golden hues, the wood beams lined with cobwebs that twinkled faintly in the firelight. The rug beneath your feet was thick and old, a bit worn at the edges, but warm. It smelled of parchment, wax, and wool. Somewhere nearby, a half-finished game of wizard chess lay paused, its pieces still, as if too respectful of the hour to finish their quarrel. And all around you, the air felt thick with comfort, the kind of warmth that came not just from heat, but from history, from the sense that this room had held thousands of other sleepy students over the centuries, that it had watched them grow, guided them through spells and storms and quiet evenings, then tucked them in gently on nights like this, when the only thing left to do was rest. You shifted slightly beneath the blanket, your body relaxing deeper into the chair's soft embrace. Your toes were warm inside your socks. You'd long since changed out of your robes, and the soft cotton of your house jumper hugged your arms like a second layer of comfort. The rain outside picked up slightly, a soft drumbeat now, playing against the tall windows like fingers on a tambourine. But it didn't disturb you. If anything, it added to the peace. The storm had passed, and what remained was gentle, familiar, a lullaby in weather's clothing. The fire popped once. Not loudly, just a small, friendly sound, like a whisper from the hearth. A log shifted, releasing a warm sigh of smoke and light. The shadows on the walls leaned slightly, then settled again, still and patient. Above, one of the dormitory doors creaked shut. You didn't turn your head. You knew the sound too well. Just another student retreating into the world of sleep, another pair of feet climbing soft steps, another quilt pulled up to a chin. You were the last one still awake in the common room now. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt like the room was keeping watch with you. As if it knew, somehow, that you weren't quite ready to leave it behind for the night. That you needed a little more quiet, a little more space, a little more firelight. So it stayed with you, its cushions soft, its corners shadowed just enough, its magic still humming faintly through the walls. You leaned your head back and let your gaze drift to the fire. The coals were glowing now, pulsing like the last heartbeats of a song. Their warmth still reached you, soft and steady, like the slow rhythm of a lullaby you used to know. Somewhere behind you, the portrait hole sighed open and closed again. But it wasn't anyone coming in, just the magic settling, just the castle breathing. The portraits on the far wall had dimmed now. Their candle sconces had extinguished themselves one by one, and the figures inside their frames were still. One had pulled a shawl around her shoulders. Another leaned against the stone edge of his frame, like a man watching the rain from a distant tower. There were footsteps in the hallway above, the soft tread of someone moving from bed to loo, or perhaps just rolling over too far and touching the floor. The sounds were small and harmless, part of the natural hum of the night. You smiled slightly and shifted again in your chair, drawing the blanket a little closer around your shoulders. The book in your lap slipped slightly. You caught it lazily, fingers resting on the spine, then let it fall closed. Its soft thump was the kind of sound that belonged in this hour. Final, gentle, the sort of sound that didn't need a reply. The air around you was warm with magic now. Old magic, the kind that didn't come from spells or charms, but from tradition, from memory, from the countless nights like this one, when tired eyes closed slowly in the firelight, and a common room whispered the same word over and over again. Rest. You let your eyes close. Not fully, not yet, but enough to feel the room without seeing it. You heard the crack of the fire, the soft patter of the rain, the gentle rustle of your own breath beneath the blanket, and you felt, clearly and completely, that you were held by the room, by the house, by the very bones of the castle, still warm from the day's life. You were safe here, safe to stay awake a little longer, safe to fall asleep whenever it happened, safe to let your thoughts go quiet and your limbs grow heavy and your dreams come softly, just like the firelight that still flickered against the stone. The chair beneath you had taken your shape now. its cushions soft and slow to respond, holding you as though they knew exactly where you needed the most support. The old wood of the armrests was smooth against your forearms, worn down over years by hands just like yours. Students long grown and gone, witches and wizards who had once sat in this very chair, breathing in the same fire-warmed air. You didn't need to move much. Not anymore. You were perfectly arranged now. Legs curled beneath you, the patchwork blanket pulled up to your waist, your cheek resting lightly against the edge of the chair's wing. You'd found that spot, the one where your body knew exactly how to settle. Your wand sat on the table nearby, alongside your half-drunk cup of cocoa. The mug had cooled slightly, but the sweetness lingered in the air. Cinnamon, honey, a hint of nutmeg. It made the room feel even softer, as if the very walls were perfumed with memory and comfort. On your lap, your book lay closed now. One hand rested on its worn leather cover, fingers unmoving, curled like ivy across the spine. You couldn't even remember which chapter you'd left off on. Not that it mattered. The words would still be there in the morning, and the day after that. For now, the only thing you needed to do was nothing. The flames in the hearth crackled low, sending shadows dancing gently across the rug. One long ember fell away from the log with a quiet snap, curling in on itself like a curled leaf, glowing deep orange before fading into ash. You watched it without watching, letting your eyes drift in and out of focus, letting your thoughts arrive and leave again, like rain tapping against a window you don't plan to open. The room around you held everything in its arms. A small quilt had been left on the back of a nearby armchair, knitted in your house colours, its threads slightly faded at the edges. Someone had left a pair of mismatched socks folded neatly on a footstool, forgotten in a rush to climb upstairs earlier. A half-knitted scarf lay beside a sleeping puffskein toy on the windowsill, the needles gently glowing in the firelight. All these pieces of life, scattered gently like breadcrumbs through the quiet. And then there was the cat. You'd almost forgotten she was there. She had curled up near the fire, stretched across a folded cloak that must have slipped from someone's shoulders hours ago. Her fur rose and fell with each slow breath, her tail twitching now and then in a dream. One ear flicked as the fire popped again, but she didn't stir, only resettled, one paw tucked beneath her chin, completely at ease. Her presence was steady, solid, soothing in a way only animals can be. Creatures who never ask for explanations, who simply exist beside you in stillness. You looked at her, and something inside you softened just a little more. You stretched your legs beneath the blanket, pressing your toes into the warm space you'd created. Your limbs had grown heavier, not tired in the usual sense, just finished. Like your body had completed something, and all that was left to do now was rest. You drew the blanket higher, tucking it under your chin. The edge of it brushed against your cheek. The fabric was soft and thick, stitched long ago by hands who'd wanted students like you to feel warm, to feel comfort, to feel home. You could smell a faint trace of old magic in the weave, like books and gingerbread and the scent of dust in a sunbeam. And beneath that, the older smell of the room itself. Wood and wool and old stone, the scent of ink on parchment, of tea spilled years ago on a reading table near the far wall, of the hundreds of hours that had been spent here, dreaming, reading, laughing, crying. Your house's heart was in this room, and now it beat slowly, softly, like the final notes of a lullaby. You let your head tilt further into the crook of the chair. You closed your eyes, not all the way, but enough to let the firelight flicker on the inside of your lids. You could still feel the room, still hear it. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm. Somewhere, high above you, a window creaked softly in the dormitories, then fell still again. A stair groaned under the foot of someone shifting in their sleep. But down here, the night had folded itself around you like a second blanket. No need to be anywhere else. No need to think of what the next day would bring. It could wait. Everything could wait. The book on your lap had slid slightly down your legs now. Its weight was pleasant, familiar. You considered picking it back up, but your hands didn't move. They were content to stay right where they were. Fingers relaxed, palms warm, your breath slow and steady. The fire whispered to itself, not loudly, not in words, just soft sounds. Little sighs of wood and coal and time, like a song that had no beginning, no chorus, and no need to end. You looked up again, slowly, eyes half-lidded now. The portraits above the fireplace were shifting again, just slightly. One was a man with a feathered cap who had once dozed off mid-conversation and had remained in that same position ever since, elbow resting on his frame, eyes closed, a quill dangling loosely from his fingers. Another was a young woman in green robes, hair braided down her back, sitting cross-legged in a high-backed chair, her head tucked against the cushion behind her. They didn't move much, but you could tell they were still there, still aware, still watching over the room. This place didn't belong to the portraits exactly, but they were part of it, like a memory made flesh, or paint, or whatever it was that kept them inside the canvas. They were part of the quiet, part of what made this space feel lived in, not just by you and your classmates, but by generations who had shared this same piece. The fire made the glass in the windows shimmer faintly. Raindrops trailed long, slow lines down the outer panes, leaving behind ghostly tracks in the dim light. Outside, the grounds were soaked in silver, and the forbidden forest stood like a shadowy ocean at the edge of the earth. But none of that mattered now. Not the rain, not the chill, not the stars you couldn't see. Because here, inside the common room, the world was warm. The chairs were soft, the blanket was heavy, and sleep was no longer far off, but near. Near enough to taste, near enough to welcome. You adjusted your head slightly and exhaled, long and slow, the kind of breath that empties your lungs and leaves you quiet, the kind that marks the moment just before the drift begins. You thought of nothing, or maybe everything. Hard to say. What mattered now was not the day you'd had, or the tasks left undone. What mattered was this moment, this fire, this blanket, this chair, this breath, and the deep, old magic that lived in the stones all around you, saying without words, "You're safe. You're home. You can rest." The room had grown darker, but not in a way that brought shadow, only depth. The kind of darkness that settled like velvet, smooth and silent, across every surface. The fire, now reduced to soft glowing coals, continued to radiate its quiet warmth. Its light cast long, honey-coloured shapes across the floor, stretching lazily beneath the chairs and catching the stitching in the edge of the rug like golden thread. Your eyes were only half open now. Not from effort, but because the world had softened so much that looking began to feel optional. You could feel the room more than see it. You knew its shape, its breadth, its edges. It was all around you, holding you. Somewhere, just behind the hearth, a wall clock ticked, its enchanted hands moving in steady rhythm, but with none of the urgency of a Muggle timepiece. Its chime was muted at night, respectful of dreams. You'd once asked a prefect if the clock ever struck loudly in the early hours, and they'd smiled and said simply, no. The castle knows when to be quiet. It was true. The castle did know. It knew when to hold still, when to dim its lights, when to hush its staircases and soften its magic. It wrapped itself around students like a caretaker, like an old tree curling its branches over sleeping birds. The portraits along the far wall had settled back into slumber. Their colours dimmed in the firelight, their brushstrokes blurred by dusk. One figure, a sleepy-looking professor with a long, ink-stained cloak, murmured something in his sleep, then shifted in his frame and tucked his chin deeper into his scarf. Another, an old woman with a basket of knitting, sat silently now, her needles motionless in her lap. You'd watched her working earlier that evening, the yarn moving like flowing ribbon. But now, even she had paused. Above her head, a tapestry swayed gently with a breeze that wasn't there. Not cold, just part of the castle's breath. A low, slow exhale that moved through corridors and corners and common rooms alike. The breeze reached you now, brushing lightly against your cheek. You leaned further into the cushions, letting the blanket shift and fall more completely over your legs. The fabric touched your ankles and held them gently, like a cat curling up beside your feet. The flickering light of the fire had begun to mirror your breath, soft, slow, pulsing. You let your eyes close completely for a moment, just to listen, to feel, to rest. And in that quiet, you became aware of something deeper, a sound beneath the silence, not loud, not sharp, more like the hum of something living. It came from the very walls, from the stones, a low, ancient magic that had never stopped humming, never stopped watching. It wasn't menacing or overwhelming. It didn't ask for attention. It simply was. A feeling more than a noise. The way trees hum in the summer heat, or snow sings under your boots. The way your own heartbeat sounds when you rest your ear on someone's chest. The castle was alive, and tonight it was sleeping too. You let the quiet settle into your shoulders. Your hands were perfectly still, now resting lightly over the closed book in your lap. The leather cover had warmed slightly beneath your touch, its corners soft with use. You no longer needed to remember the chapter you'd left off on. The book had done its job. It had led you here, to this space, to this breath, to this moment. The firelight painted your eyelids in amber, and even behind your closed eyes, you could feel the shape of the room, the curve of the archway above the portrait hole, the familiar scuff on the corner tile near the bookshelf, the long shadows of the staircase winding up toward the dormitories, now wrapped in silence. Someone had left a slipper on the bottom step. You'd noticed it earlier, poking out from behind the banister like a forgotten pet. It hadn't moved. It wouldn't. The castle would hold it there, just like it was holding you. You imagined the enchanted ceiling of the great hall above, now dark and still, reflecting the same rain-soaked sky as the towers and courtyards. The candles there would have vanished one by one, dropping into starlight. The long tables now empty, the platters washed clean. Only the smell of roasted squash and warm bread lingered faintly in the corridors. You'd passed a student from Hufflepuff earlier that evening, arms full of parchment, eyes red from studying. They'd smiled at you sleepily, and you'd nodded in return. You wondered if they were asleep now. Probably. Perhaps curled into their own common room's warmest chair, or already dreaming beneath a patchwork quilt stitched with yellow trim. The castle cared for them too. And the Ravenclaws in their high towers, wrapped in books and moonlight. The Slytherins beneath the lake, where the rain tapped against green-tinged glass like tiny enchanted bells. And your housemates, all around you. Their dreams stacked gently in the air above your head, quiet as pages turning in a book no longer being read. You imagined the common room from above, glowing faintly in the centre of the castle, like a lantern left in a window. One small light in a tower of stone. And you, curled in the chair, wrapped in warmth, a book cradled in your arms, your breath slow and long. Your muscles relaxed again, melting further into the cushions. You hadn't noticed when your shoulders dropped, or when your jaw unknotted. But now everything felt just a little farther away. Not distant, just quieter. Like the volume of the world had turned down. Your feet, once tucked beneath you, had stretched out beneath the blanket. The blanket had adjusted itself, it seemed, shifting slightly with your movement to remain perfectly draped over you. There was no chill, no draft, no disturbance, just warmth, just weight, just home. You opened your eyes for a moment, just long enough to look across the room. The fire's glow had dimmed further, now little more than coals. But it was enough. The room didn't need light to shine. The tables, the chairs, the bookshelves, all of them remained where they always had been. The shadows clung softly to the stone, no longer threatening, just there, just part of the fabric of the night. You looked toward the windows. The rain had slowed to a mist, barely more than a whisper now. Water still clung to the glass in long vertical trails, refracting the firelight in soft, blurred shapes. Beyond the windows, the grounds of Hogwarts were hidden in fog. The lake slept quietly under its veil. The forest stood unmoving, trees outlined in silver. Even the stars above had faded behind thick clouds, their light tucked away for later. And that was fine. You didn't need them. You had everything you needed right here. A chair, a blanket, a half-drunk cup of cocoa, a book you didn't need to finish tonight. And the castle. Old, steady, magical, breathing with you. The fire had dimmed to embers now. Not gone, not cold, but settled. Low and soft, like the gentle heartbeat of the room. The flames no longer rose or licked at the stones. They glowed inward, tucked under a thin veil of ash, glowing like coals that dream in silence. You watched them from under heavy eyelids. your head resting fully against the back of the armchair now, chin tilted slightly down, arms folded gently over your blanket. You didn't feel like moving. You didn't need to. The air in the common room had stilled entirely. The last whispers of movement had passed. The walls no longer creaked. The stairs no longer moaned under late footsteps. Even the portraits had fully surrendered to their dreams. The enchanted frame just above the fire, once filled with a figure who loved to read aloud to anyone still awake, now stood dim and quiet. Her chair was empty, the book folded gently on her lap, one gloved hand curled around a steaming cup of tea that no longer steamed. You felt the hush settle more deeply now, not just around you, but within. Your breathing had slowed to match it. Each inhale was soft and smooth. Each exhale drifted into the silence like fog curling across the black lake at dawn. The puffskein toy that had been lying abandoned near the window earlier had fallen over, one plush ear folded beneath its head, like even it had grown tired of waiting for someone to play. The flicker of wandlight that had glowed from behind a curtain earlier had vanished, signaling that whoever had been whispering into the flu network had finally signed off and gone to bed. You were alone, but not truly. The room was still with you. The ancient stone beneath your feet, the chair beneath your legs, the window panes that still held the last beads of rain, all of them knew you. Not just tonight, but always. Because this room had known others like you. Many others. Some had curled in this very chair after long days of learning. Some had cried quietly under this very blanket when things had felt too big or too far away. Some had studied beside this fire, or laughed in this silence, or written letters home that never quite captured what the castle really felt like. And now it was your turn to rest here. You let your fingers slide slightly across the edge of the book on your lap, tracing the soft, uneven leather of its cover. You didn't know if it would fall to the floor when you slept, but you weren't worried. The room would catch it, or leave it just as it was. Your toes twitched under the blanket, brushing against each other in a slow, sleepy rhythm. You adjusted your legs slightly, the chair creaking softly beneath you in a way that felt almost affectionate. The warmth held. Your house's colours, woven through the fabric of the cushions and the banners hanging in the shadows above, seemed to glow faintly, even in the dimness. They shimmered with the last breath of the fire, with the distant memory of laughter and cheering and mornings filled with house pride. But here, now, they felt gentle, like hands on your shoulders, like a voice saying, "It's all right, just rest." The cat near the fire stirred once. She stretched, paws reaching forward, back arching like a sleepy crescent moon. Then she flopped onto her side again and sighed, a long, satisfied sound that filled the room like honey. You smiled without realizing it. The fire crackled once more, sending a faint hiss through the air. Your body responded not with alertness, but with a deeper sense of stillness. You felt your chest rise and fall slowly, in perfect time with the castle's own breath. The enchanted lights high on the walls had faded now. One by one they had blinked out or dimmed, their magic sensing that the room no longer needed brightness. There was only one remaining, glowing faintly above the bookshelf, casting a sleepy golden halo over the row of ancient tomes and cracked bindings. You looked at it lazily, just long enough to register that it was still there, still watching, still warm. You let your gaze drift back toward the embers, and then you closed your eyes again. This time, you didn't open them right away. Your mind remained awake, but lightly so. Thoughts no longer pressed in. They floated, like leaves carried gently down the Hogwarts stream toward the lake. You remembered things, small, cozy things. A steaming mug of soup at dinner. A classmate sharing their last sugar quill during study hour. The smile on your friend's face earlier in the evening when you told them a joke only the two of you understood. Professor Sprout's muddy boots in the corridor. The soft hum of Madame Pince muttering to herself in the library stacks. Fawkes singing far away in the headmaster's tower. And then, nothing in particular. Just warmth, just safety, just the hum, the room's heartbeat, yours, Hogwarts. All one sound now. The chair beneath you seemed to soften even further. The blanket weighed more now, not heavy, but full of comfort, full of night. You shifted once more, slower this time, your breath catching the edge of a yawn that didn't quite arrive. And then, a whisper, not a voice, not a word, just a feeling, like someone had gently passed a hand through the air above your head, the kind of magic that needed no incantation, the kind that had always lived here, woven into every fibre of the place. A kind of message from the castle itself, quiet and unspoken. You are safe. You are loved. You may rest. You let go. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just a soft, steady drifting. The kind of release that came not with sleep, but the moment just before it, when your thoughts faded into pictures, and your breath felt like it belonged to the wind, and the world around you, the portraits, the rug, the coals in the hearth, the wooden beams above, the old stones in the walls, the cat by the fire, and the very magic that lived here. All whispered one thing together, as gently as a lullaby. Sleep. You weren't sure how long your eyes had been closed. It might have been a few seconds, or longer. But time didn't feel sharp anymore. It had blurred at the edges, like ink soaking into parchment. Soft and slow. Nothing hurried here. Not the castle, not the fire, not you. The common room was almost completely still now. No crackles from the hearth. No pitter-pat of rain. Only quiet. And beneath that quiet, something deeper. A sense of being held, not by arms or blankets, but by place, by history, by the ancient, gentle weight of 1,000 nights like this one. The coals in the fireplace had faded to their final glow. Their colour was barely visible, tucked deep in the blackened logs. But they were still warm, still humming their low lullaby into the stones. The heat didn't reach far anymore, but it didn't need to. You were warm enough. Tucked into the chair, the blanket pulled to your chin, your hands resting lightly across your chest. Even your breath had grown faint. The kind of breath you only hear when everything else in the world has gone silent. Upstairs, the dormitory was completely quiet now. No more creaking boards, no more restless turning. Just sleep. Even the castle seemed to have joined in. The stairs were still. The torches dimmed. The portraits stilled, their painted faces slack with sleep. Magic had not vanished. It was simply resting, slumbering in the wood and the stone and the threads of every banner. It waited, humming softly, like a lullaby in the floor beneath your chair. You didn't need to open your eyes. You already knew what you would see. A fire grown quiet. A cat curled in the same spot, her body a single warm comma in the dark. Your book, still resting across your legs. A few faint shadows from the embers slowly drawing down the walls. A few beams from the enchanted lantern near the window, glowing faintly with no flame, just magic. There was no sound of wind, no crack of thunder, only the faintest echo of your own breath in your ears. You imagined how the castle looked now from the outside. High towers sleeping under rain-polished roofs, windows dark and serene, the forbidden forest a shadow beyond, the black lake perfectly still, the boats moored silently at the dock, Hogsmeade tucked into the hill below, its lights long extinguished, its chimneys dreaming, and Hogwarts, the heart of it all, breathing slow and steady like a great ancient being that had lived for centuries and seen it all, and now watched over you in quiet peace. And you, at the very centre of it, safe. Not watched the way one is monitored, but watched the way the moon watches the sea, with fondness, with calm, with a kind of magic that never asks anything in return. You felt it in your chest, not excitement, not even gratitude, just peace. The deep, golden stillness of knowing you belong. The magic of this room, the one you'd sat in for countless nights, under firelight and between friends and beside laughter, was quieter now, but no less alive. You were part of its memory now, like the slipper on the step, like the cat near the hearth, like the crumpled parchment on the end table. All of it stayed in the room's slow breath. All of it mattered. None of it would be forgotten, because Hogwarts remembers. It remembers more than names and spells. It remembers quiet and softness, and the way your weight feels in this old chair. The blanket shifted slightly as you exhaled. Your arms had sunk deeper into the cushion now. You no longer felt like you were holding your body. The room was holding it for you. No part of you needed to move. Your thoughts floated somewhere behind your eyes, drifting in and out, images from your day softening into pieces of dreams. The corridors of the castle, empty and candlelit. The trickle of water in a courtyard fountain. The hum of a charms classroom. The scent of toast in the morning hall. A laughing voice. A stare that didn't go where it used to. A spell you still hadn't mastered. It all faded in and out, like scenes behind a curtain being slowly drawn back. You weren't quite asleep yet, but you were so close now. The cat purred in her sleep, a single, gentle sound, and even that felt like a blessing. Outside, the clouds had thinned, the rain had passed. If you'd opened your eyes, you might have seen the stars again, just a few. Distant and small, but bright enough to be real. The sky above Hogwarts always held them, even when they were hidden. You didn't open your eyes. You didn't need to. You felt them. The stars, the stone, the castle's breath. You imagined the common room again from far above, your chair tucked into the corner, your body small and still beneath the blanket. the last bit of emberlight glowing near your feet, and the room around you, watching, whispering, holding. You were still awake, technically, but only barely. You'd reached the in-between now, the place where sleep waits, where the world quiets, where the body hums, and the thoughts float without questions or shape. You didn't try to hold on to it. You let it happen. Like stepping gently into a pool that's just the right temperature. Like laying your head in someone's lap. Like drifting on a broom above a quiet valley. No more thoughts. No more lists. No more pages to turn or words to read. Just the blanket, the chair, the fire's last breath, and the deep, old hush of Hogwarts around you. The castle watched as your breathing slowed, and in a voice only the heart could hear, it said, "Sleep now, little lion, or badger, or eagle, or snake. Sleep now, little witch, sleep now, gentle wizard. Your night is over, your dreams are safe. Your magic can wait until morning. For now, just sleep." Silence, 3 to 5 seconds. The room said nothing more, and neither did you. You were already asleep.